Have you ever caught him looking at you when he thought you weren't noticing? That subtle change in his voice when he speaks only to you. The unconscious doesn't lie. Even if his words are cautious, his soul has already made a decision. And that decision is you. What if I told you that the man who sometimes confuses you with mixed signals is actually more in love than even he realizes? Carl Jung discovered that our deepest emotions bypass the conscious mind and reveal themselves through subtle behaviors we can't control. When a man's soul recognizes yours, his body betrays what his lips have yet to confess. Many women mistake silence for indifference, when in reality, it may be quite the opposite. The most authentic kind of love doesn't announce itself with grand gestures. It quietly transforms his entire world in ways neither of you fully understand. Until now. These are the unmistakable signs that his soul has chosen you, even if his mind hasn't realized it yet. That man who may confuse you with his silences, his distant attitude, or sudden closeness, might be much more in love with you than he himself imagines. Because love doesn't always arrive through logic or clear words. Sometimes it slips in through dreams, through the way he looks at you when he doesn't realize it, through how his behavior changes with you and only with you. Jung said that what is not made conscious appears in life as fate. And this applies to love too. If he hasn't yet become aware of what he feels, his soul is already acting on his behalf. Before we continue with the video, I want you to comment on this word, resonance. Do it not just for me, do it for yourself, because when you write a word that vibrates with you, you give your soul permission to recognize what it already knows. Comment, resonance. If something inside you stirred when you heard this message, if some part of you felt seen in these words, write resonance and let the universe respond. So how can you know if he's truly in love? What signs does his unconscious, his heart, his deepest emotions give you, even if he never says it out loud? This won't be a surface-level analysis. I won't talk about text messages or romantic cliches. We're going to dive into what Jung called the symbols of the soul, into how a man expresses himself when something within him vibrates every time you're near, even if he doesn't fully understand it himself. And before we continue, I want you to pay attention to each sign, because often the mistake we make is waiting for declarations, promises, or grand gestures. And we miss the most valuable thing, the way someone transforms their inner world when you are in it. Jung taught that true love isn't chosen, it isn't programmed, it appears as an inevitable force that dismantles our defenses and connects us to the most essential part of who we are. So open your intuition, your sensitivity, and observe the following. And if that man does even one of these things, if you've seen him react in any of these ways, it means he's deeply moved by you and probably much more in love than his rational mind is ready to admit. I'll show you these signs one by one, from the most subtle to the most revealing. It's not just about knowing whether he loves you, but about seeing how someone's soul responds to real love. When a man is deeply touched by a feminine presence that transforms him, even if he can't put it into words, his behavior begins to change in ways even he can't control. And the first major sign is in how his attention shifts. It's not the obvious kind of attention, the kind that seeks to impress or get attention in return. It's something more subtle, more authentic. He starts noticing details that others overlook. How you really feel even when you say, "I'm fine." How you changed your hairstyle even if you didn't mention it, or if something in your voice sounds different. This kind of attention doesn't come from superficial interest, but from a deep connection. Jung believed that true emotions project themselves so we can understand them. That's why this kind of man reacts from within, not from a strategy. He doesn't need to see you every day to remember you. You might notice that he brings you up unexpectedly, asks about something left unresolved, or simply shows up without a clear reason. He's not doing it out of habit. His unconscious is pulling him toward you. He's processing something he hasn't defined yet, but it's drawing him in. This isn't obsession or dependence, it's emotional resonance. Your energy has touched something in him, and it's beginning to speak without words. Another powerful sign is how he starts to change when he's with you. Some men act the same with everyone, but when a man is truly in love, even without realizing it, his behavior with you becomes different. He may appear more vulnerable, more open, or even more clumsy, because true love doesn't make someone appear perfect. It disarms them, and that makes them more human, more real. If you notice that he only lets his guard down with you, if his silences with you feel deep rather than awkward, you're witnessing something far beyond passing interest. But there's more. Jung believed that what the soul loves, it protects, and this man might begin to worry about you in ways that defy logic. He might want to make sure you're warm, that you're not walking alone at night, that you're eating well. It's not about control or trying to seem important. It's about something inside him that has begun to feel responsible for your well-being, as if his balance somehow depends on yours. And when that happens, when a man starts caring for you with that quiet devotion, without expecting anything in return, without seeking recognition, it means that deep within himself, he's already made you a part of his inner world. Even if he doesn't say it, even if he doesn't understand it, even if he won't admit it, his soul is already tied to yours on a level beyond reason. And so if you're seeing these signs, if every word resonates with you, don't take it lightly. Don't be confused by his lack of words. What's happening inside him is far bigger than it seems. Stay with me, because what's coming next will reveal even deeper signs, ones that only a real connection can bring to light. There are moments when a man doesn't need to say anything at all for his energy to give him away. It's as if his presence speaks for him. Maybe he hasn't told you he loves you. Maybe he hasn't made big promises or plans. But there's something in the way he looks at you, in how his breathing changes when you approach, in how he stays silent beside you without needing to fill the space. And that silence isn't the absence of words, it's complete presence. It's his soul connecting to yours with no interference. Because when a man is more in love with you than he dares to admit, his body says it all. Watch how he reacts when someone else talks about you. If you're in a group and someone praises you, observe his eyes. If someone criticizes you, notice how his expression shifts. Love doesn't have to be conscious to defend what it values. His instinct activates even if his mind is still confused. Jung said that the unconscious has its own ways, and often we are guided by emotions we haven't yet been able to name. If a man reacts, even with just a look, when someone mentions your name, it's because something inside him has already decided that you matter more than he thought. Another clear sign is in his effort. When someone feels something real for you, they make an effort. Even in the little things, it doesn't have to be grand. It's in how he listens to you, in how he remembers things you said long ago, in how he adjusts his time for you, even in how he apologizes when he feels he didn't measure up. That quiet effort reveals more than 1,000 words, because someone who doesn't feel doesn't move. But someone who loves, even without understanding it, makes space. Not out of obligation, not to impress you, but because their inner world is already reorganizing itself to include you. And here comes something very few people notice. When a man is deeply touched by your presence, he begins to change even when you're not around. His routine shifts. His thoughts become more erratic. He might seem distracted, more reflective, more restless. It's as if something has been activated within him, and he doesn't know why, but you're there, present in his mind, in his emotions, in the things that used to be automatic, and now no longer are. Jung spoke of the power that internal figures have to transform a person, even without physical contact, and you, without intending it, have become a figure that inhabits his inner world. Even if he doesn't say it, even if he denies it, you're already there. That's why you shouldn't be misled by surface behavior. Many men remain silent about what they feel, not because they lack emotion, but because it's difficult for them to translate the language of the soul into the language of words. And this is where, if you're paying attention, you can see beyond, you can sense what he himself hasn't yet discovered, that his heart has already decided to stay. Because there are more signs that reveal this silent yet powerful love. And once you understand them all, you'll see the full picture, one that may forever change how you understand love. There's a transformation that occurs in the heart of a man in love that's rarely visible at first. It's slow, almost invisible, but deeply powerful. That transformation appears when he starts letting go of certain behaviors that once defined his daily life. Maybe he used to avoid commitment, maybe he always kept emotional distance from others, or maybe he simply lived in a kind of comfortable individualism. But since you've come into his life, something has been stirring inside him. It's no longer enough to only think of himself. He starts to open mental and emotional space that he previously wasn't willing to share. And he doesn't do this as a sacrifice. He does it almost unconsciously, as if his soul is adjusting to a new reality calling to him from deep within. Watch if he has begun to share parts of his life with you that he doesn't show anyone else. I'm not talking about trivial details, but intimate fragments of his story, his fears, his regrets, his deepest dreams. When a man is connected to you on that level, he begins to show his humanity without filters, not because he wants you to see him as perfect, but because he's beginning to trust in a way he's never experienced before. At that point, it's no longer about conquest. It's no longer a game of seduction. It's surrender. And that surrender, though it may seem small, is the greatest proof that something inside him has shifted. Jung said that the soul needs a mirror to know itself. And you, through your presence, become that mirror. He begins to see you, and at the same time, he begins to see himself in a new way. There's another detail that often goes unnoticed, how he reacts to your emotions. Not everyone knows how to handle someone else's emotional intensity, but when a man is truly involved with you, he begins to sink emotionally without even realizing it. He feels your joy and smiles with you, but he also becomes unsettled when he senses your sadness. Even if he doesn't have the right words, his energy shifts when yours does. He may not say, "Are you okay?" every time, but you'll see it in how he looks at you, in how his voice softens, in how he comes closer without knowing what to do, but still wanting to do something. That desire to stand with you in your emotion, even without knowing how, is one of the most honest gestures of unconscious love. And perhaps the most revealing sign of all is what happens when you're not around. Watch how he behaves in your absence. If he brings you up in spontaneous conversations, if he saves things to tell you later if something happens and you're the first person he thinks of. In those moments, when there's no physical presence to prompt it, and you're still alive in his inner world, his thoughts, his emotions, then there's no doubt he's more in love than he realizes, because what lingers in absence is stronger than what's said in presence. And that's not coincidence, that's the soul speaking. All of this isn't about guessing what someone feels, it's about learning to read with your heart, because love often doesn't arrive with words or certainty. It comes with signs the soul sends when it begins to recognize another soul. Stay close, because what comes next will reveal how love behaves when it can no longer be contained. There's a stage where a man, even without realizing it, begins to need your presence, not as a habit, but as a form of balance. He may not express it with romantic phrases or rehearsed declarations, but something in his energy shifts every time you're far away. Maybe he won't tell you directly, but you'll notice it in his restlessness when he hasn't heard from you, in how he shows up just as you're starting to forget him, in how any excuse seems valid as long as it brings him back into your orbit, even for a moment. It's not obsession, it's not emotional dependency, it's genuine connection, the kind that comes from such a deep place that even he can't explain why he thinks of you so much. And that, according to Jung, makes perfect sense, because the unconscious isn't bound by logic or time. When a true emotion takes root there, it begins to shape thoughts, impulses, and decisions. And one of the most powerful ways this manifests is in how that man begins to consider your opinion, even on things that don't directly involve you. He might start to share his life plans and ask what you think, not to impress you, but because he genuinely wants to know if they align with yours. Not out of strategy, but because, quietly, you're becoming a guiding figure in his emotional world. He might even start opening up about his doubts, his insecurities. Not because he sees you as a therapist or doesn't know how to manage his emotions, but because his soul has recognized in you a safe presence, someone with whom he can be completely himself, no armor, no performance. And when a man reaches that level of emotional openness with you, there are no more barriers, because love isn't built on certainty, it's built on the ability to be vulnerable without fear. That trust he places in you, even unconsciously, is one of the purest expressions of deep love. But what confirms everything is how he starts to imagine his life with you, even without you bringing it up. You'll notice it when he talks about the future, and, without meaning to, says things like, "Someday, I'd love to go to this place." And in that vision, you're already there. He doesn't say it directly, but he hints at it. Those little phrases, those spontaneous mental images, are open doors to his unconscious. In his mind, you're already part of the path, not as a temporary guest, but as a stable piece of his ideal world. And you don't need to pressure him or demand clarity, because when the soul loves, it shows in the simplest gestures. If he's doing this, if his energy, his actions, and his attention are naturally leaning toward you, then what exists is real, even if he doesn't fully understand it yet, even if he hasn't found the courage to say it out loud. Because when the soul has already chosen, everything else is only a matter of time. And in that time you can see, with the eyes of the soul, what the mind still doesn't dare to say. Stay with me, because there's still more to uncover. When a man starts looking at you as if you're something he doesn't want to lose, something begins to shift in the way he relates to you. And that change isn't superficial. It's not about being more affectionate or reaching out more often. It's about how his soul begins to reorganize his world around your existence. Because when a feeling is real, the other person stops being just a part of life. They become essential to it. You'll see it in how he starts prioritizing you, even without saying it. Maybe he's having a hectic day, maybe he's pulled in many directions, but still, he shows up. Not because he has to, but because he simply doesn't want to not be there. Because being with you, even in silence, brings him peace. And peace is one of the most underestimated emotions in love, but also one of the most important. Love isn't just about butterflies or excitement. True love, the kind that forms in the unconscious, the kind Jung studied and understood as a transformative force, also expresses itself in the calm that comes from being with someone who doesn't have to change to be loved. When he feels at peace with you, when he senses that he can let his guard down, that he can be imperfect and still be accepted, he starts to see you as home. Not a physical place, but an emotional refuge. And when that happens, he begins to do something most people don't notice right away. He starts aligning with you without you even asking. Maybe he begins to enjoy the things you enjoy. He becomes curious about your passions, your ideas, what makes you come alive. He doesn't lose his individuality. He just discovers the beauty of sharing what was once only his. This isn't a coincidence. According to Jung, when two souls begin to resonate, inner boundaries begin to soften, and that's where true intimacy is born. It's not just about attraction, but about that silent sense of belonging that doesn't need to be explained. Also, pay attention to how he defends you in your absence. Maybe you don't hear it, maybe you don't see it. But in small conversations, in moments when you're not even around, he takes a stand for you, not because he wants to earn something, but because deep inside, he feels that protecting you is part of protecting what he's begun to love. Love doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply acts. Sometimes it speaks through gestures no one else sees. And that kind of love, the one that defends you even in silence, is the most powerful of all. So if he does this, if he changes his routine without realizing it, if he cares for you in unseen ways, if he thinks of you before making important decisions, don't ignore it. You are standing in front of an emotional truth that even he may not fully understand yet. And it's in that space where the purest part of love is born, in the part of us that hasn't yet been conditioned by fear, by logic, or by past wounds. Stay here, because we're about to reach the deepest signs of a love that can no longer hide. And when you arrive at that point where all the signs begin to weave together, when you look back and realize that this man has changed without even noticing it, that his actions, his silences, his smallest gestures speak louder than any words, that's when you understand the most important truth, that real love doesn't always show up with drama. It doesn't always arrive with fireworks or perfect declarations. Sometimes it comes as quiet presence, as silent care, as tenderness that doesn't need witnesses. And when a man is more in love with you than he realizes, his soul has already made a decision that his mind is only beginning to understand. Jung taught us that the unconscious doesn't lie, that within us lives a truth that reveals itself through symbols, emotions, and actions we don't always understand, but that are undeniably real. If you're seeing these signs, if you've felt this connection, if something within you knows that what's happening between you two is not a coincidence, listen to that. Trust your intuition, because often what we call doubt is simply the mind trying to comprehend what the soul already knows. In the end, what we seek isn't the perfect declaration of love, but the authentic resonance of a soul that has quietly chosen ours. The signs aren't written in grand proclamations, but in the subtle alchemy of shifted priorities, in the gravity that pulls him back into your orbit even when logic has no explanation. Jung understood that the deepest connections transcend our conscious awareness. They emerge from the place where our truest self lives, untouched by fear or strategic calculation. When a man reorganizes his inner world to make you an essential part of it, when his energy changes both in your presence and your absence, when he offers you his vulnerability without armor, that is love before words. It is recognition at the level of being. And if you're still here, if you haven't clicked away, it's because somewhere in your soul, this message is reaching you. Not with empty words or dramatic promises, but with that calm knowing that says, this is true. Because when love is real, it doesn't impose, it doesn't demand, it doesn't need applause, it simply remains, it becomes a constant. And even on the quietest days, its presence speaks loudly. A force that doesn't try to convince you, but wraps around you before you even notice. That's when you understand that love, true love, is not just an emotion. It's a language. And that language doesn't require words. You see it in the smallest moments. In how he pauses just a second longer to watch you when you're not looking. In how he remembers the things you thought he forgot. In how his gaze shifts the moment you walk into the room. What seems insignificant to others becomes a deep echo inside you. And no, it's not about perfection. Conscious love isn't built on idealizations. Sometimes there are doubts, awkward silences, temporary distances. But even in those pauses, in those cracks, there is a presence that doesn't dissolve, because what is born of the soul doesn't shatter with the first storm. Jung spoke of the process of individuation, the journey toward one's true self. But he also taught us that on that path, we meet others with whom we resonate at a level beyond logic. And when that happens, when two people who are healing meet, they don't seek to complete each other, they seek to walk together. That man who is more in love with you than he knows may not always be able to say it. He might not find the right words. He might wrestle with his own fears, with wounds that aren't yours to carry, with ghosts whispering that he's not enough. But if you watch with an open heart, you'll see his actions contradict his fears. That despite the fear, he stays. That even in doubt, he never fully walks away. Because his soul has already begun to recognize you as home. And when one soul finds a home in another, something deep begins to transform. It's no longer about being together out of need, but about sharing from a place of freedom. He's not looking for you to fix him, but to walk beside him. And you, without even realizing it, become a mirror. Someone who reflects not only his shadows, but also his light. Someone who reminds him who he is beneath all the noise of the world. That's why, when he feels calm with you, it's much more than just a sign of affection. It's an act of trust. an act that, according to Jung, is full of symbols and archetypal meaning, because we only lower our guard before what we feel is safe, what we feel is true. And if he does that with you, if he shows you his mistakes, his stumbles, his contradictions, don't see it as weakness. It's a form of surrender that few dare to offer. Many are still chasing love that impresses, that screams, that overwhelms, but you're witnessing something different, a love that stays, that remains when no one is watching, that chooses without needing a show, a love that doesn't promise you the moon because it's already begun building you a refuge on earth. And that love, though it may seem quiet, is immense because it doesn't depend on the moment, it depends on the connection. There will be days when he won't know how to act. He may distance himself, he may question whether he's enough for you, but even in that back and forth, something remains, an invisible thread that pulls him back, that pushes him to try again, because when the soul chooses, the mind eventually accepts. And you, who feel this, who perceive these signs, you're not imagining things, you are receiving a subtle language that only awakened hearts can read. You are standing in front of a bond that goes beyond labels, beyond timing, beyond certainty. You are in the presence of something growing from within, like a seed that doesn't need to be forced to bloom. Maybe he hasn't fully realized it yet. Maybe he still thinks it's coincidence or just chemistry or compatibility. But inside him, another truth is already unfolding, a truth that makes him seek you out without knowing why, protect you without planning to, prioritize you without being asked. That can't be manufactured, that is born. That vibrates. And if the day comes when he's finally able to put into words what his soul already knows, it will be because you knew how to hold space, because you didn't rush it, because you understood that mature love doesn't need to be hurried, that it's not a race, but a dance where sometimes one takes a step while the other waits. And other times, both move in sync, without ever having rehearsed. In that flow, in that mysterious harmony, the sacred is revealed, that which doesn't need to be explained, that which simply is. As Jung taught, the most authentic parts of us are not found at the surface, but in the deeper layers, in dreams, in symbols, in emotions that rise without warning. And love, when it is true, lives exactly there, in that part of the soul, untouched by lies, fear, or masks. So if you see him changing, if you notice his habits shifting, his priorities realigning, his energy softening when he's near, don't doubt it. He is in love. Maybe he doesn't know it yet, maybe he won't say it, but his soul has already chosen you. And you, who feel it too, remember, you are not here by chance. You are standing on the threshold of something real, something few ever experience, something that can't be bought, faked, or forced. A love built in silence, step by step, gesture by gesture, until one day, without warning, it becomes certainty. And when that happens, when both of you recognize it without fear, you won't need to promise each other anything, because you'll already be walking in the same direction. Not out of need, but out of choice. Out of that deep and quiet certainty that real love doesn't shout, but it changes everything. And as time moves forward, almost without you noticing, something inside you begins to change too. Not because of what he says, not because of what he promises, but because of the way his presence begins to live inside you. Not in your mind, but in that quieter, more intuitive, wiser part of you, your soul.